DAB.
This is BBC Hereford and Worcester.
11 o'clock. Good morning. With the news now, here's Gavin Kermack.
A Worcester woman who is joining thousands of others outside the Houses of Commons today in protest at the government's handling of the blood transfusion scandal of the 70s and 80s says it's time something was done. Thousands of people received contaminated blood on the NHS, with many going on to develop hepatitis, HIV and other conditions. Colette Wintle, who developed cirrhosis of the liver following a transfusion, says it's had a massive impact on her life.
There is no other treatment disaster like this that I'm aware of, and I think it's a stain on this government and every government that have failed to address this issue and to put it right. It's a deep injustice to the haemophilia community, and as a haemophiliac I'm very, very angry and deeply aggrieved.
Now, as you heard in the news with Gavin, members of the campaign group Tainted Blood will be protesting outside the House of Commons this morning. Thousands of people were infected with contaminated blood in the 70s and the 80s, but they're facing having to have their annual payouts reduced under proposed government reforms. They've forced a debate in the House of Commons today. The move could leave victims several £1,000s a year worse off. It's a terrible story, really, and you've heard already about some local people that are involved in this. Was it Colette in the news just a few minutes ago, Colette Wintle? 5,000 in total were infected with things like HIV, hepatitis C, and it's all after receiving the infected blood. Joseph Peaty, he's a fine chap, he is, Joseph. He's one of those people. He's co-chair of Tainted Blood, and he joins us on the line now. Joseph, good morning to you, sir.
Good morning to you.
Morning. Tell us your story first, if you can.
Okay, so I'm a haemophiliac, one of the people with a bleeding disorder. I should require the clotting agent factor VIII to help my blood to clot. For a great many years, though, my body resisted this. It destroyed the protein. But then in the 1980s, the early 80s, they came up with an experimental treatment to get rid of my antibody and make me react well to the treatment. But this meant actually giving me vast quantities of the factor VIII protein. This treatment was imported from America, and as you've probably heard already, it was sourced from Skid Row donors, prostitutes, drug users and prisons in America to make the product. Carried vast risks of viral infections, and as a consequence of that, my first exposure, I developed HIV, hepatitis A, B, C, and just for good measure, a little bit later on, exposure to variant CJD as well. And
you had no idea at the time that this contaminated blood was indeed contaminated, or where it came from?
No, well, of course, at the time I was only a teenager, very young, and my parents, who of course were responsible for me at that point, never given any notification of risks. This treatment was lauded as a kind of a gold standard, as an absolutely fantastically safe and effective treatment. So, certainly I feel that that the full facts were not shared with us. The wool was pulled over their eyes.
And how does this make you feel?
I come across as calm, I'm told, and in fact too calm. But I have to tell you, I have a very deep seated anger over all of this. Not just because of the infections, I have to say, but it's about the way that the government have treated, or in fact successive governments have treated us over the last 30 years. To deny any accountability, any part in this, to deny that there are any lessons to be learnt, is just astonishing, given the vast loss of life. Some 2,400 people dead because of this, and still the Department of Health have never appeared in front of any inquiry to answer for their actions, and to see whether there were in fact lessons that could have been learnt, or indeed precautionary measures that they could have taken that would have vastly reduced the disaster.
And now you have this, your annual payouts reduced under proposed, anyway, government reforms. It's a bit more of a kick in the teeth, it seems, this, don't you think?
Oh my gosh, isn't it astonishing? I mean, it's absolutely scandalous in itself that for the last 6 years, this Conservative government has said, we are different, let's talk to you, let's work through the issues. We've gone through reviews with them, we've looked at the side effects of medication, the illnesses people experience. They've talked about what it would take to resolve this once and for all, and they made out that they were going to do it. Last year we heard David Cameron apologise. And we heard him say, he stood in the House of Commons and said, we as a wealthy nation should do more to help these people. We can do more. And if I'm here after the election and I'm still Prime Minister, we will do it. And here we are, 12 months on. The Department of Health have come up with a consultation on what it would take to reform these systems. And what do they propose? To stay the same with the same unfit system, or to cut the support that's being provided already. And contrary to their assertions that they're going to put 125 million extra funding into this, they betray their own thoughts in their own document by saying they expect after the reforms for the support services to have the same budget as they do at present. The true facts of this is that the extra money is to go on treatment of people for new antiviral medication that they would have been entitled to under NHS England anyway.
So what's going to happen today?
So today, well, we can't expect much from Jane Ellison. She's never very clear. She's never upfront and transparent with their thinking. Hasn't been all along. So she will probably turn around and say that the consultation is ongoing. I can't comment at this moment. We will have to wait and see what that uncovers when they look at the answers. But I really would hope that the MPs will get their anger and our anger across to her today, that yet again we are back in the Commons with a debate. The House wants this resolved. David Cameron actually seemed like he wanted it resolved not long ago. There seems to be an awful lot of support to get this sorted out, and yet the Department of Health are fudging it again. They are just stringing us along. You have to ask, really, what's the obstacle? And the only one that we can come up with is the Treasury, and George Osborne in particular, who seems to be completely out of step with everybody else's thinking.
You are a calm man, Joseph, and I can hear the anger in your voice this morning and the emotion as well. There's no bad thing about that. I was going to ask a silly question. I was going to ask you, do you feel let down? But I think that's probably, having listened to you for the last 5 minutes, an understatement, isn't it?
Yeah, utterly understatement. We've worked with them. We thought we were moving in the right direction and we were trying to cooperate and help them achieve a closure on this. And yet we're here, and as you say, slap in the face doesn't quite describe how we feel, but that's where we're at. We seem to be in a position where they're doing a U-turn on this, where they don't want to progress this, resolve it, and they've started using the same old rhetoric that we've heard from governments down the last 3 decades, that you've got to prove liability. A liability which, I might add, is unattainable because of waivers that they've put in place, the way that they've removed access to legal aid, the way they've reformed the legal aid system to make it harder and more risky for people to take legal action. It's just impossible for us to prove what it is that they say they need in order to sort this out.
Well, we wish you well. Thanks for your time, Joseph.
Thank you ever so much.
Joseph Peaty, there, co-chair of Tainted Blood. He'll be at the House of Commons this morning speaking on behalf of the 5,000, or protesting anyway, on behalf of the 5,000 patients that were infected by this tainted blood, including some of the Herefordshire and Worcestershire people that you've been listening to on this radio station this morning. And by the way, the Department of Health says it has listened to the concern of victims, and it's been considering how to reform the support schemes available to them. That's what the Department of Health are saying. I'm sure you'll hear more of that as the day progresses. 11:17 now.